The world swam back in fractured pieces. A disorienting haze clung to Fong Wan's mind, the remnants of a drugged sleep clinging to her like a shroud. The room was dim, lit only by the faint glow of a street lamp filtering through a gap in the curtains. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Panic clawed at her throat, a silent scream trapped within. Where was she? What had happened? Memories of the previous night flickered like a damaged film reel, her adoptive mother's strained smile, the sweet, cloying taste of the tea, then nothing. A chilling realization washed over her. She had been drugged. Sold. The thought was a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. She bolted upright, the thin sheet tangled around her legs. Her gaze darted around the unfamiliar room, searching for an escape, a lifeline. Then she saw him. Song Yubai. He sat in an armchair by the window, his silhouette a dark, imposing figure against the muted light. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. A flicker of hope ignited within her, fragile yet persistent. He was her only chance. Help me, the words were a choked whisper, barely audible above the pounding in her ears. Shame burned in her chest, hot and suffocating. To be so vulnerable, so utterly dependent on a man she barely knew, but survival trumped pride. I'll give it to you, she continued, her voice gaining a desperate edge. If I can get the promised 2 million, my mother won't sell me to others. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. 2 million. The price of her freedom. Song Yubai remained silent for a long moment, the silence amplifying the frantic beating of her heart. He studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She could read nothing in his dark eyes, a vast, uncharted ocean. What was he thinking? Did he believe her? Or was he simply amused by her desperation? Each second that ticked by felt like an eternity, stretching her nerves to their breaking point. She fought the urge to shrink back, to disappear into the shadows. She had to be strong. She had to convince him. He finally shifted, the faint rustle of his clothing breaking the oppressive silence. Tell me everything, he said, his voice low and steady, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within her. His words were a command, yet there was a flicker of something else in his tone, curiosity. Perhaps even concern. She couldn't be sure. Fong Wan hesitated, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. Could she trust him? He was, after all, a stranger, a powerful man who had bought her like a commodity. Yet, he was also her only hope. She took a shaky breath, the scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to the air, a subtle reminder of her precarious situation. My mother, she has gambling debts, she began, her voice trembling slightly. The words tumbled out in a rush, a torrent of suppressed fear and anguish. She promised me to someone else. A much older man for 2 million yuan. They drugged me at the birthday dinner. I don't remember anything after that. She closed her eyes, the image of her mother's calculating smile flashing behind her eyelids. The betrayal was a sharp, stinging pain. As she spoke, Song Yubai listened intently, his gaze unwavering. He seemed to absorb every word, every nuance of her voice. His silence was both unnerving and strangely comforting. It felt as though he was giving her space, allowing her to unravel the tangled threads of her story without interruption. It was a stark contrast to the constant barrage of criticism and manipulation she had endured from her adoptive parents. When she finished, the silence returned, heavier this time, laden with unspoken questions. Fong Wan watched him, her heart pounding in her chest. He rose from the chair, his tall frame looming over her. She flinched involuntarily, a primal fear gripping her. But he didn't touch her. He simply stood there, his expression inscrutable. The silence stretched, each second an agonizing eternity. Finally, he spoke, his voice a low murmur that seemed to vibrate in the still air. 2 million, he repeated, a hint of something she couldn't quite decipher in his tone. Was it amusement? Disdain? Or something else entirely? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, rectangular object. A checkbook. He flipped it open, the crisp, white pages rustling in the quiet room. With a few swift strokes of a pen, he filled it out, then tore it off and handed it to her. Fawn Wan stared at the check, her mind struggling to comprehend. 2 million. Just like that. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. Why? She whispered, the question barely audible. Why would he help her? What did he want in return? A flicker of a smile played at the corners of his lips, a fleeting expression that quickly vanished. Consider it an investment, he said, his voice enigmatic. I have my own reasons. He turned and walked towards the door, his silhouette disappearing into the dimly lit hallway. Rest, he said, his voice echoing back to her. We'll talk in the morning. Fawn Wan sat there, the check clutched in her hand, her mind reeling. She was safe, for now. But what would the morning bring? What kind of investment had she just become a part of? The questions swirled in her mind, a disquieting premonition of the complexities that lay ahead. She looked down at the check again, the crisp paper a tangible symbol of her newfound freedom, yet also a stark reminder of the price she might have to pay. The night stretched before her, long and uncertain, filled with the shadows of unanswered questions and the unsettling weight of a future yet unknown. The sleek glass doors of the Song Group headquarters reflected the gray morning sky, a stark contrast to the opulent birthday party the night before. Fawn Wan's reflection stared back at her, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. Beneath the expensive dress Song Yubai had chosen, a tremor of unease ran through her. She'd stepped into a world of power and wealth, a world that could chew her up and spit her out if she wasn't careful. This is it, she thought, no turning back. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the revolving doors, the cool air conditioning a stark contrast to the humidity outside. The clicking of her heels echoed in the vast, marble lobby, each step a declaration of her arrival. The receptionist's plastered smile faltered for a fraction of a second, her eyes flitting over Fawn Wan's attire before regaining its professional composure. Miss Fawn? She inquired, her voice meticulously neutral. Fawn Wan nodded, suppressing the urge to fidget. Mr. Song Yubai is expecting me. Expecting me as his fiancé, how absurd. The irony wasn't lost on her. Just yesterday, she was facing the grim prospect of being sold off by her adoptive parents. Now, she was playing the role of a wealthy heiress. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Please take the lift to the 28th floor. Mr. Song's office is the first on the left, the receptionist instructed, her voice smooth as polished stone. As Fawn Wan stepped into the lift, the mirrored walls reflected her image once more. Don't show fear, she reminded herself, her eyes hardening. You've survived worse. The 28th floor was a labyrinth of sleek corridors and glass-walled offices. The air hummed with quiet efficiency, a subtle undercurrent of power. As Fawn Wan approached Song Yubai's office, two figures emerged from a side room, their voices carrying down the hallway. One was a woman with impeccably styled hair and a sharp, assessing gaze shenmening, if Fawn Wan remembered correctly from the party. The other was Lu Dazhuang, the HR manager, his face etched with a smug smile that sent a prickle of unease down Fawn Wan's spine. Well, Shenmening drawled, her voice laced with a saccharine sweetness that felt anything but genuine. Isn't this our little gold digger, fresh from her triumphant performance last night? Her words hung in the air, sharp and barbed. Fong Wan's grip tightened on her purse. So, it begins. She'd anticipated this, the inevitable backlash. Miss Shen, Fong Wan replied, her voice steady, I believe your interpretation of last night's events is somewhat skewed. Inside, her heart hammered against her ribs. Stay calm, she told herself, don't let them see you sweat. Lu Dazhuang chuckled, a sound that grated on Fong Wan's nerves. Skewed? My dear girl, everyone saw you clinging to the second master. Isn't this my sister who's sleeping with an older man just to escape her miserable life? His words were crude, deliberately designed to wound. Fong Wan's breath hitched. The blatant accusation, the veiled insult, it all sent a wave of anger surging through her. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. Don't react, she cautioned herself, they want to provoke you. She lifted her chin, her gaze meeting Lu Dazhuang's with icy composure. Mr. Lu, your assumptions about my personal life are both inaccurate and offensive. Oh, really? Shen Menying interjected, her eyes glinting with malicious amusement. Then perhaps you can explain why the second master suddenly decided to announce his engagement to a nobody. She emphasized the last word with a sneer. Before Fong Wan could respond, a calm, authoritative voice cut through the tense atmosphere. Miss Fong, the second master is in a meeting. Director Li emerged from the corridor, his expression carefully neutral, yet his eyes held a flicker of concern as they met Fong Wan's. His presence shifted the dynamic, introducing a new layer of complexity to the already charged situation. Fong Wan felt a flicker of relief. An ally, perhaps? Or another player in this intricate game? Shen Menying and Lu Dazhuang exchanged a quick, uneasy glance. Their carefully constructed facade of confidence seemed to crack ever so slightly. Director Li, Shen Menying said, her voice losing some of its earlier sharpness, we were just welcoming Miss Fong to the company. Indeed, Lu Dazhuang added, his tone unnaturally jovial. Making sure she feels comfortable. Director Li's gaze swept over them, his silence more potent than any words. I'm sure Miss Fong can manage on her own, he said finally, his voice smooth as silk. Unless, of course, you have some specific company business to discuss with her. The challenge hung in the air, thick with unspoken tension. Shen Menying and Lu Dazhuang shifted uneasily, their carefully rehearsed smiles faltering. They knew they'd overplayed their hand. Director Li's unexpected intervention had thrown a wrench into their plans. They'd been so confident, so sure that they could humiliate and discredit Fong Wan, paving the way for their own agenda. But now, they were on the defensive, their motives exposed. No, nothing like that, Shen Menying stammered, her composure finally cracking. Lu Dazhuang cleared his throat, his face flushing. We were just leaving, actually. They retreated down the corridor, their hurried departure a clear admission of defeat. As they disappeared around the corner, Fong Wan let out a slow, controlled breath. The encounter had left her shaken, but also strangely invigorated. She had faced their hostility head-on, and she had not broken. Director Li turned to Fong Wan, his expression softening slightly. Are you all right, Miss Fong? He asked, his voice gentle. A wave of exhaustion washed over her, the adrenaline fading, leaving her feeling drained. She nodded, managing a weak smile. Thank you, Director Li. I appreciate your intervention. He gave a slight nod, his gaze unreadable. The second master will see you as soon as he's free. He gestured towards the plush seating area near Song Yubai's office. Please, make yourself comfortable. As Fong Wan sank into the soft leather sofa, her mind raced. Director Li's unexpected defense had raised more questions than it had answered. What were his motives? Was he genuinely concerned for her well-being, or was he playing a different game altogether? The uncertainty gnawed at her, a constant reminder of the precariousness of her situation. She was surrounded by sharks, and she had to tread carefully if she wanted to survive. The afternoon sun, filtered through the panoramic window of Song Yubai's office, cast long shadows across the plush carpet. Fong Wan sat perched on the edge of a luxurious sofa, the leather cool against her skin. Her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, betrayed the nervous tremor that ran through her. Just moments ago, she'd been a pawn in a game she barely understood, a transaction disguised as a marriage. Now, with the arrival of Song Yubai's parents, the stakes had been raised. She watched them, their faces etched with an unsettling blend of curiosity and disapproval, and wondered what new twist fate had in store for her. They know something, she thought, her heart pounding against her ribs. Something I don't. Mrs. Song, a woman whose elegance barely masked a steely resolve, settled into an armchair opposite Fong Wan. Her gaze, sharp and assessing, lingered on Fong Wan's face. "So, Miss Fong," she began, her voice smooth as silk yet edged with a subtle chill, "tell us a little about your family." Fong Wan hesitated, her tongue suddenly thick and clumsy. How could she explain the tangled web of deceit that constituted her family history? The lie she'd been living for years felt like a constricting garment, threatening to suffocate her. My parents are," before she could utter another word, her adoptive mother and father were ushered into the room. Their faces, normally jovial and greedy, were now pale and drawn. They avoided Fong Wan's gaze, their eyes darting nervously toward Song Yubai's parents. A wave of nausea washed over Fong Wan. "They've sold me again," she realized, a bitter taste rising in her throat. "They've come to renegotiate the price." The revelation hung heavy in the air, thick and suffocating. Song Yubai, who had been observing the scene with an unervingly calm demeanor, finally spoke. "Mr. and Mrs. Fong," he addressed them, his voice a low rumble that vibrated with barely contained power, "I believe we had an understanding." "Mr. Fong stammered, his words tumbling over each other in a rush of nervous energy. "Master Song, we didn't mean to, it's just, Mrs. Fong cut him off, her voice sharp and shrill. "You are just a bastard that I picked up from outside 20 years ago. We raised you, clothed you, fed you. We deserve compensation." The word struck Fong Wan like a physical blow. She knew they harbored resentment, that their affection had always been conditional, but this brutal honesty, laid bare in front of strangers, was a new level of cruelty. A tear traced a hot path down her cheek, but she refused to let them see her break. She lifted her chin, meeting their gaze with a defiance she hadn't known she possessed. "You will not break me," she vowed silently. "I will not let you." Song Yubai's eyes flickered towards Fong Wan, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. He turned back to her adoptive parents, his expression impassive. Directorly, he called out, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. A man stepped forward from the shadows, a man Fong Wan recognized. Directorly, the man who had shown her kindness, who had seemed to be her only ally in this strange new world. He offered a slight bow to Song Yubai. "Yes, second master." The formality, the deference, sent a chill down Fong Wan's spine. Directorly, her protector, was working for Song Yubai. Had he been manipulating her all along? Another layer of deception peeled away, revealing a truth even more complex and unsettling than she had imagined. Who can I trust, she wondered, her mind reeling. Who is truly on my side? The conversation shifted, turning to business, to the intricacies of the Song Group's latest acquisition, a collection of rare and valuable antiques. As they discussed the pieces, Fong Wan's mind began to race. She recognized the descriptions, the subtle nuances of craftsmanship, the historical significance of each object. A forgotten passion, buried deep within her, ignited. Almost unconsciously, she began to speak, correcting a minor detail about a Ming dynasty vase, offering an insight into the provenance of a jade pendant. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, a mixture of surprise and disbelief etched on their faces. Song Yubai's mother, her initial skepticism replaced by a flicker of curiosity, leaned forward. "Miss Fong, you seem to know a great deal about antiques." Fong Wan's heart pounded in her chest. She'd revealed too much, shown a side of herself she'd kept hidden for years. But the words, once unleashed, could not be taken back. I've always been fascinated by history and art," she stammered, trying to downplay her knowledge. At that moment, the door opened again, and a man entered the room. He was tall and distinguished, with an air of quiet authority. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the room, settling on Fong Wan. A strange sense of familiarity washed over her, a feeling she couldn't quite place. "Zhang Jingshua," the man announced himself, his voice calm and resonant. He turned to Song Yubai. "I understand you have acquired the Autumn Moon collection. I would be grateful for the opportunity to examine it." Song Yubai nodded, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Mr. Zhang, a pleasure. We were just discussing it." Zhang Jingshua's gaze returned to Fong Wan, lingering on her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "This young lady, she reminds me of someone." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. A gasp escaped Mrs. Fong's lips. It's the truth, long buried and carefully concealed, finally burst forth, shattering the carefully constructed facade of Fong Wan's life. Zhang Jingshua, the renowned antique expert, the man whose name was whispered with reverence in art circles, was her father. Song Yubai looked from Fong Wan to Zhang Jingshua, his expression unreadable. "This little girl who makes money for you are very different from those women who come to me for my money, power and status." His words hung in the air, a new chapter unfolding in the complex tapestry of their intertwined lives. The crystal chandeliers of the Royal Hotel ballroom cast a shimmering light, reflecting off the polished marble floors and the glittering gowns of the guests. The air buzzed with polite conversation, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the low murmur of a string quartet. Fong Wan felt a tremor of unease beneath the surface of this opulent display. She adjusted the emerald necklace, a gift from Song Yubai, its weight a tangible reminder of the precariousness of her situation. Just hours ago, she was facing a bleak future, her adoptive parents ready to sell her off. Now, she was the fiancée of the second master of the Song family, a role she hadn't auditioned for and yet was expected to play flawlessly. Her fingers traced the cool jade of the bracelet on her other wrist, another gift from Yubai. She had been showered with these tokens of wealth, but what good were they if her position was built on a lie? Shen Menying, her newly appointed supervisor at Song Group, glided towards her, a predatory smile playing on her lips. Fong Wan braced herself. Shen Menying had been relentless in her subtle digs and thinly veiled insults since Fong Wan's arrival at the company. "Fong Wan, isn't it?" Shen Menying's voice dripped with false sweetness. "I must say, your luck is truly astonishing. From a nobody to the fiancé of second master Song, truly inspiring." Fong Wan's stomach tightened. She could see the veiled contempt in Shen Menying's eyes. "Inspiring or suspicious? Which is it you really mean, Shen Menying?" Fong Wan thought, her gaze steady. "Luck, perhaps," she replied evenly, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil. "But I also believe in hard work." Shen Menying let out a delicate laugh, a sound that grated on Fong Wan's nerves. "Hard work? Oh, I'm sure. Tell me, dear, what kind of hard work does it take to catch the eye of a man like you by? Her words, though seemingly light, carried a barbed edge. She gestured to a display of antique jade pieces, a centerpiece of the birthday celebration for Mrs. Song. Perhaps you have a hidden talent for appreciating finer things. The implication was clear. Fong Wan was a gold digger, her interest in Yubai purely materialistic. Fong Wan's gaze followed Shen Meniying's gesture, landing on a particular jade belt hook. A flicker of recognition sparked within her. It was a replica, a good one, but a replica nonetheless. The real belt hook, she knew, had a minute imperfection, a tiny chip near the dragon's head. An involuntary smile touched her lips. This was her domain, the world of antiques and art, a world she had explored in secret for years. This jade belt hook, Fong Wan began, her voice gaining a newfound confidence, is a fine example of craftsmanship although not quite as fine as the original. Shen Meniying's smile faltered. What do you mean? This is a genuine antique. A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the rising tension. Fong Wan could feel their curious gazes upon her. She took a deep breath, a calmness settling over her. If you look closely, she said, pointing to the nearly invisible flaw, you'll see the chip I mentioned. The real belt hook, which I had the privilege of seeing at an exhibition last year, has this distinctive mark. This one does not. A hush fell over the crowd. Shen Meniying's face paled. She stammered, "Tu wouldn't know. I was merely admiring it." Just then, a voice boomed across the room. This jade belt hook is one of the best among the antiques and treasures I have collected. I give it to my daughter, Fong Wan. A distinguished-looking man, his eyes sharp and intelligent, strode towards them. He held an identical jade belt hook, the real one, in his hand. The room erupted in murmurs. Fong Wan's heart pounded in her chest. She recognized the man. He was Zhang Jingshua, the renowned antique expert, a man she had only ever admired from afar. Daughter? The word echoed in her mind, a confusing blend of shock and a strange sense of belonging. Song Yubai's third brother, who had been lurking at the edge of the crowd, his face a mask of smug satisfaction, suddenly turned ashen. His plan to discredit Fong Wan by planting the fake antique and framing her for theft had backfired spectacularly. Zhang Jingshua's arrival not only exposed the deception but also unveiled Fong Wan's true parentage. Mrs. Song, who had been watching the scene unfold with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity, approached Fong Wan. Her eyes, initially filled with suspicion, now held a glimmer of warmth. "My dear," she said, her voice softening, "I believe congratulations are in order." Fong Wan's mind raced. The puzzle pieces were falling into place, revealing a picture far more complex than she could have imagined. She looked at Zhang Jingshua, his eyes filled with a warmth she had never experienced from her adoptive parents. She looked at Song Yubai, a flicker of understanding passing between them. And then, she looked at Mrs. Song, whose acceptance, though tentative, felt like a lifeline in this turbulent sea of secrets and revelations. The fear that had been clinging to her began to dissipate, replaced by a nascent sense of hope. The game, she realized, had just changed. The opulent ballroom of the Royal Hotel, still echoing faintly with the remnants of celebration, now held a different kind of tension. Crystal chandeliers cast long, shimmering shadows, reflecting in the tear-filled eyes of Fong Wan's adoptive mother. Her father, usually a boisterous man, stood beside her, shoulders slumped, his face etched with a remorse so deep it seemed to age him. Fong Wan watched them, her heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Just hours ago, they had been ready to sell her future, to barter her happiness for a fleeting financial reprieve. Now, they stood before her, broken and pleading. "Warner," her mother choked out, the name a fragile whisper in the vastness of the room, "can you ever forgive us?" Fawn Wan's internal monologue swirled. Forgiveness? Could she truly erase the hurt, the betrayal? She saw the genuine pain in their eyes, the lines of worry etched deep into their faces. Perhaps, she thought, desperation could drive even the most loving parents to unthinkable acts. A small, hesitant nod was all she could manage. Her voice, still thick with unshed tears, was barely audible. I don't blame you." A relieved sob escaped her mother's lips. Her father stepped forward, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch her arm. He hesitated, as if unsure whether he deserved such a gesture. Fawn Wan didn't flinch. She let him hold her, the warmth of his touch a stark contrast to the icy fear she had carried for so long. The reconciliation, fragile as it was, brought a sense of closure, a quiet peace amidst the storm that had just passed. News of the dramatic events at the birthday party, the exposed forgery, and the revelation of Fawn Wan's unexpected expertise in antiques, spread through the Song group like wildfire. Lu Dazhuang, the HR manager whose oily smile had always grated on Fawn Wan's nerves, was summarily dismissed. The whispers followed him out the door, a chorus of condemnation for his collusion with Song Yubai's ambitious third brother. Shen Menying, the supervisor who had relished in Fawn Wan's initial discomfort, met a similar fate. Her carefully constructed facade of competence crumbled under the weight of her own deceit. Fawn Wan, watching their departures from the cool, impersonal confines of Song Yubai's office, felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it was quickly replaced by a profound sense of weariness. She had won this battle, but the war for her place in this new world had just begun. Song Yubai watched her, his gaze intense, searching. He saw the exhaustion behind the mask of composure, the subtle tremor in her hands. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft, a stark contrast to the sharp, decisive tone he used in board meetings. Fawn Wan met his gaze, her heart skipping a beat. "Just tired," she admitted, a small, self-deprecating smile touching her lips. He stepped closer, his presence radiating a warmth that chased away the lingering chill of the day's events. "From now on," he said, his voice low and resonant, each word carrying the weight of a promise, "you will be my legal wife. Mrs. Song." The title, spoken aloud, felt both surreal and strangely comforting. Fawn Wan's mind raced. Wife. Mrs. Song. It was a label that carried immense weight, a responsibility she hadn't anticipated. But within that weight, she also sensed a strange sense of security, a shield against the uncertainties that had plagued her life for so long. She looked at Song Yubai, truly looked at him, not as a savior or a business partner, but as a man who had offered her a future. "Thank you," she whispered, the words inadequate to express the gratitude that swelled within her. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, transforming his usually austere features. "You don't need to thank me," he replied, his voice laced with a tenderness she hadn't heard before. "I wish you were a little greedy guy," he added, a hint of amusement in his tone, "so that I can give you more of what you want." Fawn Wan felt a blush creep up her cheeks. Greed was a concept she had long suppressed, a luxury she couldn't afford. But now, looking at Song Yubai, at the sincerity in his eyes, a flicker of something akin to desire ignited within her. Not for wealth or power, but for the simple things, stability, belonging, and perhaps, even love. The following days brought a whirlwind of changes. Fawn Wan moved into the Song family residence, a sprawling estate that felt both intimidating and strangely welcoming. Mrs. Song, initially wary and disapproving, slowly began to thaw. She saw the quiet strength in Fawn Wan, the intelligence that shone through her gentle demeanor. She saw, too, the genuine affection that was blossoming between her son and his new wife. The acceptance, though gradual, was genuine, and it warmed Fan Wan's heart in ways she hadn't thought possible. She began her apprenticeship with Zhang Jingxue, the renowned antique expert whose sharp eyes and encyclopedic knowledge had both intimidated and fascinated her. Working alongside him, she felt a sense of purpose, a connection to a world she had only glimpsed from afar. She discovered a passion for the intricate details of ancient artifacts, the stories they held, the secrets they whispered across centuries. In the quiet moments, as she held a delicate porcelain vase or traced the inscription on a bronze mirror, Fan Wan thought of her adoptive parents, of the life she had left behind. There was a pang of sadness, a lingering ache for the familiar, but it was overshadowed by the growing sense of hope that bloomed within her. The past, with its pain and uncertainty, was finally receding, replaced by the promise of a future she was finally free to create. She was no longer the vulnerable girl desperate to escape her circumstances. She was Fan Wan, Mrs. Song, a woman with a past to reconcile with and a future to embrace. The journey ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but with Song Yubai by her side, and her newfound passion guiding her, she knew she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The fear had finally faded, replaced by a quiet confidence, a sense of belonging, and the burgeoning hope of a love that was as unexpected as it was profound.